politics, business, sports, arts, music. Mike and Marty on the beat. Mike and Marty. Mike and Marty on
Good morning, Dulles Falls and Rockingham, and welcome to the feed. It's Mike Smith. Marty Gallagher is here today on Zoom, and today's guest is Leslie Goldman. Good morning, Marty. How you doing?
I'm doing good. It seems odd to be here on a Monday. It's very not in my normal mode. So I'll try to keep up.
Okay, yeah. We are here on the 24th. It is a Monday in the middle of the coldest part of the winter, it seems. It's like everybody's frozen out. Marty, you want to do local events?
Yeah, so tonight and tomorrow night are the last showing of the Kingsmen at the Bells Falls Opera House. If anyone's familiar with the Kingsmen series, this is the prequel that kind of explains how they came to be. And that's directly from Mike, so don't quote me on that. I didn't go see it, but he did. The classic movie this week is The Beatles' Yellow Submarine. That's being sponsored by Popolo. That's at 7 p.m. And just want to remind everybody that there's still another weekend of Food and Shelter, which is a play written by Sean Hurley and directed by David Stern. It's taking place down in Putney at the Next Stage Theater. It's running the 28th, 29th, and 30th. Advanced tickets are $35 and tickets at the door are $40. If you go to the Next Stage website, you can buy tickets and you can read a little blurb. It's basically set in a snowy cabin in the woods. It's a newly married husband and wife. And it sounds like there's some mystery and intrigue that go on during the course of the play. So highly recommend it. You do need to wear masks and you do need to have been vaccinated to keep everyone safe.
Thank you, Marty. And yes, Sue and I went to see The Kingsman yesterday. It was an excellent action adventure movie. Maybe we should start doing movie reviews. It was anyone who knows anything about the history, the events that happened leading up to World War I and during World War I are sort of portrayed in this movie. It's a origin story for the Kingsmen, and it's quite entertaining. You'd really like it. But today's guest is Leslie Goldman, and she's going to help us get up to speed on what's happening in the Vermont legislature. So, Leslie, how you been?
Very well, and thank you, both of you, for coming in on a Monday. I know it's hard to change your schedule. I appreciate it, Marty, because Monday is our off day, and the rest of the week we're in session.
So, the legislature itself is running slightly different this year than it did last year, and definitely different than it has in the past. So, how would you describe that?
Well, I think there's a lot of people trying to figure out how to make the legislature work effectively in the world of COVID. Last year, we were all Zoom. The first 2 weeks of the legislature, we were all virtual. And this last week and this week, there's now what's being called a hybrid model. The floor is all virtual, and votes from the floor virtually are allowed. But committees can be hybrid. And the hope is that people will participate in their committee in person. The leadership and the sergeant at arms and the Capitol Police and all the people that work at the State House have done an amazing job trying to keep all of us and themselves, of course, safe. There's testing. We can get PCR tested on Wednesday and Friday. We've been sent tests. And the hope is that we do it 2 days before we come up. So if you come up on Tuesday, you're supposed to do it on Sunday and Monday. Of course, if you're sick, then don't come. So I think, a lot of efforts being put in to sort of recreate the State House as it usually would be, which is there's hall conversations and interactions and lunch. And, for me, of course, as a first term legislator, it's all new. I did go up for part of the week last week, and it's true. It's great to hang out with people. But for someone who hasn't been in the world for 2 years, it was a little stressful. So it was everything. Yeah.
I can imagine. I mean, that's putting it very well. Not being in the world for 2 years. It seems like that's how all of us are coping right now, and it's getting back to those routines. Do you think that they'll eventually try to go to a more in-person model? Is that the long range goal, or
Well, the long range goal, of course, is to go back to in-person legislating, but the leadership is using the science. They have epidemiologists and infectious disease doctors who are advising on what's the safest. The numbers are being tracked carefully. Numbers, particularly in the State House, are being tracked carefully. I haven't seen anything official of cases, although I think I've heard through the grapevine that there's some. So, using the data, and they're also looking at this metric called rate of rise. So if there's one week and one the next week, well, that's not too bad. But if there's one week and 10 the next week, then that's not good. That is bad. So they're looking at really a scientific and thoughtful approach to be able to do both, which is keep all of us safe and also serve Vermonters and do the job we've been elected to do.
Yeah.
Nice.
Marty?
What are the top items that you're currently working on? What are the big ticket things happening right now?
Well, we just passed budget adjustment. I don't have actual numbers, but it was a lot of money to readjust the budget for this year. That's FY22. We're now starting work on the FY23 budget, which includes a lot of money from the feds that have to get distributed. It includes many, many things. Workforce is a huge issue right now, really in all sectors, particularly healthcare, which most people have heard about. There's really hospitals struggling to keep staff because they get sick and the work is so demanding that some people can't sustain it. How that gets answered, the workforce problem, particularly in nursing, which is what I'm most familiar with, is a longer problem than just COVID. People just haven't been going into that profession in the numbers that we need them to. So that's something that really needs to be explored. What Vermont could do as a state without federal and regional sort of collaboration, I think it's really important that we do that. So the workforce, I think, is really number one in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of the strategies that you're thinking of? I mean, how it seems like such a big nut to crack. What are you starting with for strategies to develop the workforce?
Well, I think they're in so many different committees. There's healthcare workforce, there's, workforce to do broadband, there's, trades workforce. So it's really, I think, trying to understand it from a 36,000 foot level. And that probably happens most at appropriations because that's where the money gets distributed. I know that in healthcare, we have asked for funding. We did fund and probably will ask more. So we're just starting that conversation now for scholarships and retention bonuses and loan repayment. And, one of the bigger problems, of course, which has nothing to do with us, is housing. And there are many examples of people who were prepared to come to Vermont, professionals, but couldn't find housing, so had to turn a job down.
Wow.
So we're in a huge, the housing, I think, is driving so much of the workforce. So I think that that's going to be coming out of, other committees than mine, trying to, I think I saw three things this morning. One was to rehabilitate middle income apartments that aren't available now but could be, so support that, to build low income housing, all those kinds of things, to really expand our housing options, which will then help with the workforce. Yeah.
Interesting.
Do you see any things specifically targeted to our area, like any programs coming our way or things that would benefit the Rockingham, Bellows Falls greater metropolitan area?
I haven't seen anything specific to here yet. I know the governor actually mentioned Bellows Falls in his budget address, and I think it had to do with transportation in supporting the station, the railroad station, that kind of stuff. But he made an effort to include many towns. So I don't know of anything specific for our area at this point.
So you have a specific bill in the House right now, Bill 540. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, my bill is what's called a short form bill. So there are two different kinds of bills. There's a short form bill, which is basically a concept. And then there's a long form bill, which elaborates the concept into implementation. This summer, I spent a lot of time trying to understand where we stood with healthcare. Act 48 was in 2014. It failed. It was single payer health. And it was under the Shumlin administration, and it couldn't be funded, and it didn't happen. I wanted to understand why it didn't happen, because I didn't want to do anything that didn't make sense in the state regarding healthcare. I ended up talking to like 30 people over the course of the summer. Very interesting people, smart people, people on the Green Mountain Care Board, hospital CEOs, lots of docs, all kinds of bi-state, which is involved in primary care, all kinds of people. And what I learned, which wasn't surprising, but it was kind of clear, that we spend a lot of money on what I'm calling the most downstream part of our healthcare system. It's at hospitals, it's when people are already sick. And I just couldn't help but wonder if we ended up putting more effort upstream, and there's this concept called the social determinants of health. And our health, all of us, is determined by factors that we live in. Genetics, we can't really change, but it's a factor. But it's housing, it's education, it's poverty, it's trauma. Healthcare itself only really accounts for about 20% of our health. It's a very small fraction. So I just couldn't help but wonder, if we moved money upstream, then we would have a healthier population. If we have a healthier population, then we have people who can work and get jobs. We have healthier families, we have healthier children. And that would end up costing less for our society. There would be less demands in education. There would be people paying taxes. There would, all the kinds of things that would come from a healthier population. So I wrote a short form bill asking us to study that. What would it take to integrate sort of the health department, which does population health? We learned a lot about the health department in COVID, and they do population. They're looking at our whole population. And then there's clinical health, which is where we go and we get our medical care. There's not a lot of interaction between those two systems. And it would be great if there was. I think we'd have a healthier population. So I wrote a bill asking for a study to examine population health, the effect of social determinants of health on our population, and integrating clinical medicine and public health. So that bill was introduced, and it went to Human Services Committee, because it is about, that's their jurisdiction. I must admit, I was disappointed. I was hoping it would go to healthcare, because then I could really, work with it. And it doesn't seem terribly likely that it'll be taken up this year. But what I'm learning, new legislature, one has to have patience. And if one really believes in something, to really keep at it in a longer term way. So of course, if I get reelected, then next year I'll reintroduce it again, and, just keep the conversation going. I've already talked to a number of people on the Human Services Committee, but they have a lot on their plate right now, particularly because they're responsible for all of COVID, the policy making around COVID, from the public health point of view. Interestingly enough, what healthcare is, I should stop there. Do you have questions about that? I was going to go off on a whole nother thing.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
No,
so
that's...
Go ahead.
Mike. I mean, I was just thinking that's so relevant right at this moment.
So was that clear enough? I mean, did it make sense? When you're so embedded in something, you could like babble on and
right.
Okay, good. So interestingly enough, what the healthcare committee is working on now is, when COVID got started, there had to be a whole bunch of changes in our regulatory systems and licensure to allow people to have access to care. And a lot of those regulatory changes expire March 31st in 22, and that's coming up in 2 months. COVID's not over. The idea was that COVID would be over and we'd go back to our usual way, but we can't, because we still have Omicron. So what we've been talking about is reviewing all that legislation and extending it until March of 23. So it was a whole regulatory effort that was important and had to happen, but that's what we've been doing.
Yeah, just going back to your healthcare bill, it makes, having been in what I would consider like the field of preventive health, i.e. people actively being fit and eating healthy diets. And it makes 100% sense that you spend way less money on if you spend some money on the front end, like you invest in your health on the front end, it pays off big time on the back end, because you're not going into the hospital for the major heart issue, or you're not spending money for diabetes medication and all of those things. It makes 100% sense to me. It's just sometimes trying to sell that. It's a harder sell to people
Oh, yeah. I totally agree. I think the mental health issue is particularly important here when we deal with poverty. Poverty is such a trigger for mental health issues because it's so traumatizing to be so insecure. And it leads to drug issue, and so when dealing with that, poverty is a huge issue. I really wish we could take on straight on. But that's a big one.
Yeah. Isn't there some work being done around like restructuring, I think you call it reapportionment? Is that still going on?
Oh, yeah, for sure. This is a big deal, of course. Every 10 years, by the US Constitution, we have to have a census, which everyone remembers. And then based on the census, the number of legislators within the state get decided. And it's based on population. We've had population shifts in Vermont. I think our statewide population is about 620,000. So the Vermont Constitution says that we need 150 members of the House. So you just divide that number, 150 to the total Vermont population, and one legislator represents that amount of that amount of people. So it's about 4,200 people. So then what happens is everything has to align with that. And there's something called the Legislative Apportionment Board, comes out of the Secretary of State's office, and they create a map. And that's been controversial. They created a map based on single member districts. Of course, Wyndham 3 is a 2-member district with myself and Carolyn Partridge. And we represent 5 towns in that little slice of Westminster. The Legislative Apportionment Board maps, what they're calling the majority map, the vote was 4-3. So it was close, right? Mm-hmm. And the chair of the board voted for the minority map. Okay, so it wasn't simple. It wasn't partisan. It was, really across the board of who voted for which map. So there are 2 maps on the table. One's called the majority map and the other's called the minority map. And they present very different vision of our town, of Rockingham. The majority map envisions a 1-member seat with part of Rockingham, including Bellows Falls and rural Rockingham, carves out Saxon's River. So eliminates Saxon's River from being part of the Rockingham district and puts Saxon's River with Westminster and Brookline, I believe. That's the majority map. The minority map changes that, and their recommendation is that Rockingham stays whole, so Saxon's River back in with town of Rockingham, and then puts Westminster together and adds Brookline with a 2-member district. And that would be a change. So I think that there are really 4 options on the table at this point. Well, let me just back up a minute and say, right now, these maps are being explored by the Government Operations Committee in the House. After all the BCAs have had an opportunity in every town, to respond to the maps and give opinions. I know the Rockingham BCA did. I'm on the BCA as a JP. So we had a meeting in the fall. I think the conversation right now is, do we need to have another conversation? And we'll see how that plays out. Once government operations gets all their input, they will make a decision on the maps they're going to recommend. So I think that there are 4 choices. One is the majority map, which carves out Saxon's River and leaves Rockingham as one without Saxon's River. The minority map, which puts in Rockingham, Westminster, Brookline. Third, the current map, leave it as it is with our 5 towns. And fourth, unknown. What else, might they come up with to solve the problem of 1 person, 1 vote? Yeah, it's a very interesting time.
Yeah.
Now, as constituents, do we as the public have any way to input on that, or is it strictly what you're chosen to do? So that's what the government does.
No, it's through the BCAs, through the boards of civil authority in every town. So every that's on the website of your town or our town, Rockingham, and everybody. And so contact anyone on the BCA to express opinions, for sure.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know, because people might have strong opinions on that.
Yeah.
And we're New Englanders. We don't like change.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, I think that carving out Saxon's River, is a really challenging question.
Yeah. Why is, just out of historic perspective, why are some districts 2 members and some districts 1 member?
Well, I think that when they look at the map, so this is, every 10 years, there are a lot of factors that go into making up the maps. One is pure population, of course, but the other is culture. Where do people go when they shop, or, where are their hubs? Geography, is there a mountain between them? Roads, school districts, all the different things that make up our culture. And like Wyndham Northeast, well, Wyndham Northeast is made up of Rockingham, Westminster, Athens, and Grafton. So for Rockingham and Westminster to be together, actually, we have a common school district. There is some logic there. So, it's that. It's the culture, it's common interests, I guess I would call it, as well as geography and just pure numbers.
Yeah. It's just an interesting question of, why aren't they all single person? But I guess it's that whole, if the groups of people are naturally larger, then they would have 2 representatives. Yeah.
Well, it's really complicated because if you look at Burlington or Chittenden County, which of course is our population center, and they up there have grown significantly, while we in Wyndham County have lost population. So we're going to lose representation. Now, how that plays out with how they create this map is what's so important. Right. In Chittenden County, if you just look at the Senate side, they have 8 senators. We have 2. So there does seem to be a little inequity there. If you look at you are represented, you have 8 voices where we only have 2. Right. Some people are thinking about it from that point of view.
Yeah, we have about 3 minutes left. Marty, do you want to ask a final question, or?
I do actually have 2 questions. First, I want just for Leslie to give the information for how people to get in contact with her. And I was just my own curiosity, and I think probably people watching. Are you still doing your constituent meetings?
I have my next constituent meeting I actually scheduled on February 24th. So look for information about that.
Okay. And how do people sign up for that?
Go to my website. It's lesliegoldmanvt.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter, and you'll get information about how to sign up for that.
Nice. And if people want to email you in general, what's the best email address?
The best email, is right up there. That's perfect. lgoldman@ledge.state.vt.us. Perfect. Thank you.
Nice.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Leslie, and good luck. I hope you guys get to go more and more in person. It's always great to have you on and get up to date on what's happening with our local legislature. It's such an important thing to keep abreast of. Hopefully, we'll have you on in a month or so, and you can come back and talk some more. That's it for the feed, and thank you. Goodbye, community.
Thank you.
News, politics, business, sports, arts, music. Mike and Marty.